Hello, I'm Dr. Gene Halus. Welcome to Wages of War. We're here today to speak with Vietnam veteran Edmond Cubbage about his new book, Just a Kid from Swamp Poodle to Vietnam. Edmond, could you tell us a little bit about the neighborhood you grew up in Philadelphia, Swamp Poodle, and where exactly it is in the city of Philadelphia and what it was like?
Oh, the people that live in Swamp Poodle was great. We were middle-class people as far as I was concerned. Our parents were firemen, policemen, bus drivers. My dad was a mechanic, and that's what I think. We weren't making a lot of money, but we didn't know we didn't making a lot of money. We enjoyed playing tag and running and doing everything else.
And the people, were they mainly Irish in the neighborhood, or?
Yes, they were Irish Catholic, and most of them were, and some of them were German, and some of them were Italian and all. We were an Italian neighborhood, an Irish neighborhood, and a German neighborhood too. But it was a great neighborhood to grow up in.
And can you tell me a bit about specifically the kids when you grew up? I mean, what did you guys do?
We played ball, we played football, we played baseball. Matter of fact, our St. Columbus won the co-championship at one time of football, CYO, which was a big thing of the whole city. We must have played 10, 15 different Catholic schools at one time. And we won we became co-champion. And then 5 years later, we ended up in Vietnam.
And now St. Columba's, big parish, little parish?
Yes, St. Columbus was one of the big parishes in the neighborhood at the time. Most of them were all immigrants from Ireland. 22nd of Lehigh, the old Connie Mack Stadium. And we had a ball there. We would be outside catching balls and going in to the ball games and all, selling papers. We did it all.
Can you tell us a bit about why you decided to serve in Vietnam?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I didn't decide to serve in Vietnam. I was drafted. I was thrown out of school, and I went to Edison, and it didn't work out in Edison because of racial problems. I left school, and my mom and my father was proud of what I was doing. I was going into the service, and that's why I went.
Now, how old were you when you went in?
I was 19 years old when I went in, and I was being drafted. We were drafted. President Johnson was announced that he was doubling the draft. And that Monday, I got the draft notice. I said to myself, wow, they're really fast. And I thought it was funny. And I went up to the corner, and I told the guys, they're doubling the draft. Guys were being drafted from our neighborhood, or guys that we knew. I didn't realize at the time what was going to happen, but then Monday morning, I got drafted. And I had like about 15 days. I was working at Penn Ventilator at the time, and I had like 15 days to go down to get X-ray, to be examined and everything else. And they told me I was leaving for Vietnam. I'm not for Vietnam, for the service.
And that was when you did that was all down on Broad Street?
Yes, 401 North Broad Street.
Now, can you tell us a bit about, once you entered the service, what boot camp was like, basic training, through to the fact that you were a paratrooper, and what was that training like?
I joined the paratroopers because it was $55 more a month than I was making. I was making $65 for being in the Army and another $55. And it seemed like a good idea at the time. And I did it because of a friend of mine from my neighborhood, Tommy Powers. He was a paratrooper. He said, you're making $55 more a month, which doubled my salary. And at that time, we didn't have a lot of money, but I was happy to make that type of money. And that's why I joined the paratroopers. And I was proud to do it.
Now, I'll take a line out of your book. Could you talk a little bit about what it was like to have a sergeant kick you out of a plane?
Yeah. It was funny. I was the first man at the door at one time, and the sergeant yelled at me, "Are you scared?" And I said, "Yes, Sergeant, I'm scared." He said, "I'm going to kick you in the butt." And when he did, I didn't realize he did it. I went out of the plane, and I never felt it at the end.
Now, what was it like jumping out of planes?
It was exciting. I was 19 years old.
Yeah. No, it was exciting at the time.
I just want to go back because we didn't get a chance to really talk about basic training. So what was basic like?
Basic was fine. I wasn't a great athlete. I was a good athlete. I played baseball. I was probably a better baseball player than I was a football player. I was right in line, that I thought I was pretty decent. I was better than a lot of other people. And I went through basic training, and a lot of guys helped me through basic training. Helped me to take the weapons apart, guys that I met from South Carolina and from Kentucky. They showed me how to take the weapons apart and put them back together. And I was very proud. And we became good friends. And I'm still good friends with most of them. Well, not most of them, with guys that's left. I still phone them once in a while. And we still have a good time talking on the phone. And I see them at reunions.
Edmond, another question I'd have about Swamp Poodle is, it's the 1960s, Philadelphia is beginning to deindustrialize. What would be the story in Swamp Poodle about jobs and crime and these sorts of issues? Well,
the neighborhood was changing, and it wasn't changing for the better, it was changing for the worse. The factories were beginning to move out and all, Old Hickory on Lehigh Avenue, Airmasters on Allegheny Avenue, and other companies that was moving out. Now, people were losing their jobs, and people were moving out of the neighborhood, moving to Roxborough or Manayunk. There wasn't any jobs available like we would before. And we decided, not we, but the service was probably the best part of coming into it. You could make a salary. Now, my dad was sick. Me joining the service, not joining the service, being drafted, I could send money home to them and all. And I was happy doing that and all, So that's one of the reasons why when I got drafted, my parents were proud of me. And I didn't have too many things that they were proud of me for because of I wasn't really smart in school. And I'm not being wise, but I wasn't smart in school. And I was getting in trouble, a little bit of trouble and all, But once I got drafted, they were, oh, my son's going into the Army. So they were proud, and I was happy with that and all, what I mean? And I could help them.
So in the 1960s, Swamp Poodle would have been a neighborhood in transition. Were there racial tensions? Were there problems with crime?
Oh, yes. Lehigh Avenue was the dividing line, just about, of racial stuff. On the north side of Lehigh Avenue was the white people. The blacks came over. There was a lot of problems. And the same thing with the whites and all. There was stabbings on both sides of the neighborhood, blacks and whites. They would get in fights, and there were riots. Cops would be around. They would try to stop it, but there were problems.
Now, did I get into a few fights? Yes, I got into a few fights. I almost was stabbed once or twice on my own block, on my own street, Silver Street, 2500 Silver Street.
So we've talked a little bit about the issue of race in Swamp Poodle. What was that same sort of issue, race, like in the service?
Well, in the service, they had racial problems and all. I got into a fight one time, and it wasn't about race, but he was a black guy. But the captain said it was about race. He didn't want to hear my side of the story, and I don't know about his side of the story. But anyway, I ended up with an Article 15. And back in Vietnam, now there wasn't no problems out in the jungle. Out in the jungle, everybody got along. and they protected one another. Back at base camp, that was another problem. You know what I mean? Sometimes there were racial problems and all. When two whites got into a fight, it was okay. Two blacks got into a fight, it was okay. But if a white and a black guy got into a fight, they always claimed it was racial. Sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't. Now I had, in my book, I tell where 4 guys got shot in basic training, and it was by two guys from South Carolina. Well, that started racial problems for a while. But you know what? It ended once we got out in the field. It was problems, yes, there was problems, but there wasn't nothing that could be solved when you had problems in the field.
So why was it different in the field than back at, say, base?
You depended on one another. I depended on them, and they depended on me. I pulled a black guy down. He was stuck in some weeds, and I pulled him down, and we were being shot at. And he claimed for the rest of the tour that I saved his life. Now, I don't think I did, but he claimed that I did. And he was one of my best friends, Young. His name was Robert Young, and he's in my book. I don't know where he's at now. I wish I could track him down. If anybody could track him down. I know he was from New York or South Carolina. That's all I know about him.
Edmond, can you talk a bit about where you served in Vietnam and some of your combat experiences?
Yes. I was in a place called Phuc Vinh. It's about 35 or 40 miles from Saigon. But I was mostly in the jungle all the time. Now, I had a lot of firefights I was in that I was very lucky to get out of. And I had a big battle August 25th where, you know, like I said, we probably ran into a regiment and all. We broke into their base camp to get these friends of mine out of the base camp. Now, I don't know what else to tell you, but, you know, it's a combat, you know what I mean?
Can you name some of the battles you were in?
Well, I could name, well, August 25th was probably one of the biggest battles that we had. It was probably one of the biggest battles at the time, August 25th, 1966. 15 guys roamed into a regiment camp, and we had to go in and get them. And I'm still friends with Chuck Mandel. Every time I see him, I say, "You try to get me killed." And we laugh about it. Almost got myself killed. But he tells the story about it. But it was a long day, and it wasn't easy to survive. Now, how I survived it, I don't know. I think about that a lot, don't know, you know?
Did I make it through? Yes, I made it through. I'm here 50-some years later, but I don't know how I made it through. I was lucky. God was with me, you know, and that's all I have to say.
You mentioned in the book that 58 other young men served in Vietnam from the Swamp Poodle neighborhood. Can you talk a bit about what they were like?
Yes. When I was writing this book, I put on the internet and I asked how many guys from our neighborhood went to Vietnam. They had 58 people that I responded to me. There were probably more than that I didn't know about. But I ran across 2 guys in the jungle, which was hard to do. And if they had been 5 feet away from me, they gave us a break. And if they had been 5 feet away from me, I would have never ran into them. And the second time, a Rub Hearn, I ran into him. He said, "Oh, there's a lot of guys from Vietnam here. I mean, from the Swamp Poodle here." And I laughed and I said, "I didn't know that. No, I thought I was the only one." At the time, I didn't know who was there from our neighborhood. But we had a great neighborhood and was very close with one another. And those 2 guys, they both died, but afterwards, 10 to 15 years later. But I had them over my house after we got out of Nam, and we were friends for a long time.
They were American paratroopers of the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and with fierce pride in their outfit, they called themselves the Sky Soldiers.
Edmond, can you tell us a bit about the guys you served with in companies B and C in the 1st Infantry Division?
Yeah, I would love to talk about them. I was in B Company, 1st to the 2nd, and C Company was right next to us, of the 1st and the 2nd. Now, not most of the guys. When we went over to Vietnam, we were all supposed to go to different companies. So I was supposed to go to the 173rd, but they put us all in the 1st Infantry Division because they got hit and they were going home. And we went over to the 1st or the 2nd Infantry Division. Now, it was a great company. I had a lot of blacks with me and some whites with me and all. When I go to reunions, I look for them all the time, but I can't find them. Now, whatever ever happened to them, I don't know if they just don't show up at our reunions or whatever. There was a lot of blacks, and we got along very well with them as far as I was concerned. Now, did we have problems? Yeah, we had little problems with them once in a while, but, nothing that we couldn't solve.
What was it like readjusting once you returned from Vietnam?
Well, in the very beginning, I was excited just to get out of Vietnam, and I was happy to do it. And once we got back to Philadelphia, then I started realizing people didn't want to talk to me. Did I feel, I'd be on the bus and they'd look at me, especially if I had my uniform on.
And I had my medals on, and I was proud to come home with it.
And they'd just look and nobody would say anything. So was I depressed? Yeah, I guess I was and all, you know what I mean? But I was upset with it the very beginning. And then when I was home, I realized, I couldn't trust some of my friends. I thought, they would say, oh, did you kill any kids? Did you, and I didn't like that. I got upset with it. Emotionally, I probably couldn't handle it. And another reason why I didn't say anything to anybody, but my old girlfriend was getting married at the time, and she was in the papers and all that. She was getting married. So I decided to take a trip around the country. And that was the main reason I did it. I mean, my heart was broken, and I did realize that I couldn't trust some of my friends that I thought, they didn't go into the service, or they weren't in Vietnam. And they asked me these stupid questions. So I just left, and I went around the country with a friend of mine, Ed Collins.
Now, did Ed serve with you?
No, Ed was in Germany years before I was, like about 3 years before I was. He signed up like when he was at 17 years old, but he was in and out of the service.
So on this road trip, where did you go, and how do you think it helps you readjust?
It helped me a lot. We went around the country, and he could tell you more than I can remember, but I enjoyed it and everything else. It got a lot out of me and all. I had a 50 Chrysler that I bought for $1 for Mrs. Horn from Horn and Harditz. Now, Mrs. Horn, they had a chain of restaurants in Philadelphia and New York, and she was a friend of my mother's, and she sold me her 50 Chrysler for $1. And I loved it and everything else. It took us all around the country.
So you say all around, did you go out to California?
We went out to California. We went to Mexico. I couldn't tell you what, I almost got locked up in Mexico coming back from Mexico, but that was fine.
And then did you head north at all, like Washington, Oregon, the middle of the country?
No, we just came home. And when we came back, we enjoyed ourselves and all.
And it was a fun deal. Ed said I should have wrote a book about traveling around the country. Some of the things I don't remember.
And one of the other things you mentioned that was really essential to you adjusting was friends and family. Can you talk a bit about why they were important?
When I came back, maybe not in the very beginning, when I came home from Vietnam, I thought they were against me. If I got upset, my mom and my dad, they thought he was having a problem. Oh, he was, World War II guys. And I had to get I had to leave. So I left. But when I came home, they were more loving to me, more caring to me than I realized. I needed them afterwards. Maybe not in the very beginning, but I did need them afterwards and all.
How about your wife? Did she play a big role?
Oh, yeah. First of all, she asked me to write this book. Years afterwards, I was running around for 2-3 years without, I met girls and I never, and I met her in Margate. She was a school teacher from St. Cecilia's grade school. We dated for like about a year and a half. And then we decided to get married. Been married 51 years and never regretted it.
Edmond, could you tell us a bit about your journey? Who is Edmond Cubbage in a few words?
Well, I grew up in North Philadelphia, in Swamp Poodle. Now, I wasn't smart in school. I'm going to tell you right now, I wasn't smart. I had problems. I went through a year in North Catholic. I got thrown out of North Catholic. I went through Edison, and I didn't like Edison. I get in fights in Edison because of racial problems. And then I got drafted into service. Now, after I was drafted into service, I was sort of proud to be drafted because of my parents. Like I said, I wasn't going nowhere, and I knew that. But then after I got out of the service, and after I went through, I went around the country, and once I met my wife down Margate, I was down Margate 2-3 years before I met her. I met a lot of girls down Margate. Once I met her and I realized that I wanted to make something of myself, and she would be the one that would help me. She was smart, educated, and everything else. And if I had children, they would go to college. I have 3 children.
And they all got college degrees.
My one daughter, she's an attorney. And my son's a football coach and a teacher at Ben Salem. And my other daughter, she's getting not a master's, a doctorate. So I'm very happy with them.
And my grandkids are doing very well. My life is good now. Did I have a couple bad years? Yes. But you know what? I am very happy, contented with my life.
Edmond, you've mentioned before that you see your family and friends as really your salvation once you return from Vietnam. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, my family always been close as far as that. My older brother, my younger brother, and my sister and all. Did we have problems? Yeah, we had problems. And my friends, I always felt dear to my friends. I'm very loyal to my friends, and most of them are loyal to me as far as I'm concerned. I always love them and everything else. If something happens to them, I try to be there. And if something happens to me, they've always been there with me. But every time that somebody passes or something like that, it hurts me and all, it still hurts me. Just like guys that I served with in the service. For some reason, I always loved the people that I was with. They were always close to me.
Edmond, I'd like to thank you again for coming to speak to me about your book, Just a Kid from Swamp Poodle to Vietnam. Thank you.
They came from the farm, the village and town, from Cork in the south, from the North County down. From points in between they sailed o'er the seas, gave meaning to Cahill Middle Culture. From starvation and strife they sought a new life, built churches and railroads and fought for their rights. With hammer and stone men worked to the bone, the Irish came to Philadelphia. From St. Columba up to Corpus Christi, from Irish Mayfair out to Havertown, they were the fighters and party all-nighters, building the city while cursing the crown. Swamp Poodle was home to folks from Toronto.
Ready? Aim.